Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and oh boy, I guess it's time for me to review Shadow Warrior 2. Now, I would have had this review out a little bit earlier, but unfortunately, the schedule didn't line up. I got my review code a little late, didn't have my draft ready by the weekend, and I had to go visit people, and now I'm currently suffering from some throat-based illness, so you know what, sod it. I'm gonna power through this. I'm gonna try my damnedest not to cough or splutter during the course of this video. But yeah, where do I start? Well, the first Shadow Warrior game by developer Flying Wild Hog was a big surprise for me. I honestly wasn't expecting much from a remake of a game originally released back in 1997, but you know what? It turned out to be hugely satisfying. So when I found out that those same developers were planning a sequel, you can bet I was pretty excited. I was pretty much counting down the days until I could finally get myself another face full of wang. That kind of came out a little bit wrong, but anyway, moving swiftly on, Shadow Warrior 2 kicks off several years after the ending of the first game. The world's now warped by a collision between a realm of demons and immortals, and the realm of everyone's favorite walking dick joke, Lo Wang.
Oh, how nice, for me?
After receiving a supernatural artifact from a demon-infested temple, Lo Wang finds himself tasked by the Yakuza to track down the boss's daughter, Kamiko. Before he can get to her though, Kamiko is injected with something that makes her sound a little bit like she's auditioning for a role in The Exorcist.
I am the end of all times. I am the shadow of the world. THUNK.
Regardless though, Wang manages to break her out and brings her to his local wise old man who engages in some mystical bullshit, the result of which being Kamiko's soul residing in Lo Wang's head until they figure out how to get rid of whatever's taken over her body. A quest that will take him all over the twisted lands of post-demonic apocalypse Japan. So, even with the setup out of the way, there's still a lot of stuff to take in here for the Shadow Warrior newbie. I don't think I was adequately prepared for the avalanche of gameplay mechanics that Shadow Warrior 2 was going to throw at me, especially in these opening few hours of game. At first you're introduced to staple stuff like the evasive dash, the mid-air dash, special melee moves, but the one thing that certainly had me scratching my head the longest was the loot and the weapon upgrade system. To put it bluntly, Shadow Warrior 2 features a metric fuckton of upgrade gems, and they pretty much form the basis for the game's loot system. They come in different colors, they come in different shapes, they all have their own name, and they even come with their own level number. The point of these is that you jam them into your weapon, which usually has 3 slots, and it will alter the properties of the weapon itself. So properties can include base damage, critical damage, chance of actually dealing critical damage, elemental damage, which ranges across fire, ice, electric, and toxic. You can even add stuff like the ability to drain life, drain chi, boost mobility, fire rate, clip size, and oh my god, just listing all this stuff is making my head feel like it's being caved in with a shovel. It's a lot to take in, and this game honestly doesn't help things by throwing upgrade gems at you like free candy on Halloween. It's a lot of numbers, a lot of shifting stats, a lot of trade-off attributes that you need to bear in mind for certain elemental properties and accuracy and movement, and my nose is bleeding, but thankfully it's not vital for you to get your head around this stuff in the early stages of the game. Mostly it comes down to your proficiency with guns, blades, and knowing when to dash yourself out of harm's way. When it comes down to the combat itself, arguably the one thing that Shadow Warrior 2 really needs to nail, I still feel like it's pretty damn solid. It was one of the stronger aspects of the first Shadow Warrior. It's still pretty strong here. There's nothing quite like wading into a crowd of demons, dodging to the left to avoid that blade launched at your head before unleashing a fully charged vortex slash, just obliterating anything unfortunate enough to still be in range. In those moments, it's a fantastic power trick, but it's not always that easy. It would lose its charm if it were, and not all enemies here are created equal. Nearly every enemy in this game has some kind of variant. Even the damn rats come in different flavors. To start with, you'll get your common garden variety, vanilla flavor, fall apart if you sneezed at them too hard enemies. Then we'll get superior grade enemies, then elite grade enemies that won't just be bigger and stronger, they'll occasionally also have elemental properties for you to deal with. They might even be flanked by lesser enemies, and it quickly scales up. It quickly becomes a very fun, fast and frantic melee when you're dealing with things that have electric resistance, but also deal toxic damage. It's a fun way to keep the combat feeling a little fresh, to force you to think on your feet and deal with new additions to the fray on the fly. And these kind of encounters pretty much form the meat and potatoes of the stuff you'll be dealing with on a regular basis in Shadow Warrior 2. To spice things up though, you'll occasionally come across champions. Now, champions are for the most part optional mini-bosses, and you'll find at least one of them roaming around somewhere in each mission you take on. And champions are pretty much your ticket to the good stuff, exotic weapons and high-grade upgrade gems. They're bigger and stronger than everything else, can have multiple phases, and they will generally smash your shit in if you come at them half-cocked. It's these kind of encounters where Shadow Warrior forces you to pay a bit closer attention to all of those upgrade gems littering your inventory, when you suddenly realize that a blinged out minigun equipped with an ice gem and extra damage output will make a fight with a towering flaming behemoth a hell of a lot easier than without. After that, the upgrade system makes a little more sense, but it doesn't stop the system as a whole from remaining somewhat of a head-scratcher. A lot of numbers, a lot of attributes to deal with, and to be perfectly honest, it kind of bogs the game down. There'll be moments where you just want to crack on, but first you have to stop, dive into the menus, and sort through a lot of guff first. At worst, it feels like busy work, and it can get kind of tedious. I get the feeling that Shadow Warrior 2 has more than a little bit of Diablo running through its veins. People might expect me to compare against the Borderlands games, but to be honest, I've never played them, so Diablo's the best comparison you're gonna get. You've got the quests, which you can take from folks back at home base, you've got the loot gained from either boxes or corpses, and you've got leveling up. Killing enemies grants karma, the game equivalent of XP. You get enough, you gain a level and a skill point, which you can also get from completing quests. From there, you spend it on a little bit of character development. You'll probably find yourself gravitate towards the basics at first, increasing your health, damage dealing, and ammo pools before maybe dabbling in the more complex sounding stuff like elemental effectiveness and resistance, but like the weapon upgrade gems, it all feels like too much fat around the meat when you compare it against its predecessor, which was a game that itself suffered a little bit from a heavy case of upgrade screens. This game just feels like it should have been more streamlined, but it just feels like they've gone the complete opposite route. Another aspect of Shadow Warrior 2 that seems to gorge itself on the all-you-can-eat buffet is the weapons themselves, and good grief, it's hard to know where to start. You've got pistols, shotguns, machine guns, miniguns, rocket launchers, gauss guns, katanas, plasma blades, plasma guns, grenade launchers, friggin' bow and arrows, probably even sharp sticks in there somewhere. If that wasn't enough, much like the enemies, the guns have variants, each with their own particular look, and some with their own exotic attributes. There's a bow and arrow in here that has a chance to turn enemies into a rabbit, a machine pistol that doesn't run out of ammo, and a demonic toxic warhead rocket launcher, which has a ridiculous name, probably something like the Destroyer of Realms. There's even upgrade gems here that can turn certain guns into a deployable turret, maybe even enable dual wielding or allow remote rocket detonation. Honestly, you're probably going to be spending as much time in the menus tinkering around with these weapons and figuring out their quirks as you will actually pulling the triggers. Ultimately, it all comes down to the loot. You'll be hunting down champion-grade enemies purely on the basis of what you can hoover up when you take them down. You'll be obsessively opening every box you come across too, on the sliver of a chance that one of them will also give you something weird-looking and destructive. It encourages deviation from the path, and as a side effect, kinda sacrifices a lot of forward momentum. The objective can wait. We have boxes over here. Boxes, 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 boxes full of crap. And I can certainly see that this kind of shift in direction might annoy a lot of people that really enjoyed the first Shadow Warrior and were hoping for more of the same, just refined and tightened up a little. But it's clear that developer Flying Wild Hog wanted to take risks, and that's something that even extends into stuff like the level design. Gone are the linear levels of its predecessor. Instead, here we have procedurally generated locations that retain key distinguishing features, but everything around them, the layout, the geography of the level, changes. It's a pretty disconcerting feeling when you revisit a recognizable themed location and find everything's been moved around a little. You can't really rely on your normal sense of direction, and you end up feeling a little bit like Gandalf trying to make his way through the mines of Moria. It's hard to kind of understand why they went for this approach. I mean, it's a well-implemented approach. I love the fact that they take advantage of weather conditions and night and day to make successive visits actually feel a little different, but I kind of have to wonder about the benefit of this. What does it really serve for the player? Because once you've played that side mission once, you're going to have to replay the entire thing again to get to that same side mission and experience it in a slightly different configuration. If there's one level theme here that completely rubbed me the wrong way though, it has to be Zilla City. Whenever you go there, it's like some kind of visual whiplash. You go from these great-looking temples, towns, and villages that have some kind of believability to them to this neon nightmare full of hologram trees and cybernetic enemies that bleed bright blue. It's like Lo Wang stepped through a portal into Blade Runner by way of Blood Dragon. It just made my eyes sting and pretty much made everything a lot less fun to deal with. All I wanted to do was get through those levels as quickly as possible because to me, they were the definition of a themic clusterfuck. As for the story that's threaded throughout all of this, it kinda sucks, especially in comparison to the first Shadow Warrior, but if you're in it for the simple pleasure of Lo Wang repeatedly insulting people and coming up with half-baked one-liners, then you'll at least have that. On that level, it certainly succeeds. I'd honestly struggle to explain, though, the who, what, and why of Shadow Warrior 2 without referencing a whole bunch of stuff from the first game and giving myself some kind of aneurysm. It's not very self-contained as far as stories go, and if you're interested in playing Shadow Warrior 2 for yourself and you haven't played the first game, you should probably do yourself a favor and play that first. In terms of other story elements here, you're also saddled with Kamiko as a sidekick headmate for the duration of the game, as a kind of echo of Lo Wang's relationship with Hoji from the first. Where Hoji allowed Lo Wang to do progressively cooler stuff, Kamiko teaches you how to teleport to locations, and then that's kind of it. She'll chime in to bicker with Lo Wang over elements of the mission you're currently on, but God forbid you start a fight at the same time, because you won't be able to hear shit while carving demons into meaty chunks. There is certainly something screwy with the audio levels there. Speaking of meaty chunks, I do have to appreciate the effort they put into the gore. It's satisfyingly visceral, as you may have already noticed several times during this video, what with the occasional intestine flying out when you put the chainsaw and other similar weapons to work. I'm pretty impressed with the damage enemies will show before they kick the bucket too. Gunshots will regularly leave great big holes in enemies, and the swipe of a blade will occasionally lop an arm off, which is hilarious when you're dealing with non-demonic enemies like the Yakuza, and they pretty much treat it like a flesh wound. Suppose I can't fault them for sheer homicidal dedication. In terms of how the game performed on my system, which runs on a AMD 8320 8-core chip and a GeForce GTX 970 card, there were some admittedly understandable frame rate dips. I mean, there's nothing like a mob of enemies and everything exploding at the same time to punish your chosen pixel pump, but the game did seem to struggle whenever I visited the neon-drenched city sections of the game. My rig did not like those one bit. The most jarring moments, however, were when the game would just inexplicably tank to 1 frame per second after doing something relatively innocuous, like slicing a bug in half. It would stick there for a few seconds before catching its breath again, which is pretty damn unusual, all things considered, but thankfully it's something that wasn't too frequent, but still, it's odd to run across that more than once or twice during an entire run. You might also be wondering what I thought of Shadow Warrior's 2 co-op feature. It allows you to drop in on someone else's game as an ally ninja, or allows up to 3 players to do the same during your own campaign run. It's a promising idea, lots of ways that it could be integrated in fun and interesting ways, but truth is, at the moment in its current state, it's just there. There's no voice option, there's no text chat options, no emotes, no meaningful interaction beyond the usual demon shredding, and honestly, I was kind of disappointed by how shallow it felt as a feature. It seriously just feels like a bolt-on. Ultimately, Shadow Warrior 2 is a game that certainly doesn't take the easy route for a sequel. It's not more of the same, it's something a little bit different. Personally, despite the roughness, despite my vehement dislike for the city levels, and despite all the upgrade menu loot management faffery that could definitely stand to be streamlined, I had fun. The core here is still solid. That hacking, slashing, blowing holes in enemies and impaling them on spike stuff is still great. It's still satisfying to me, and really that's what counts. If it can hold my attention for the duration, even with all the weird extras that I wasn't expecting, then that's the mark of something that works, even if it is occasionally despite itself. What I'm trying to say here is Shadow Warrior 2, at the very least to me, is very much worthwhile, and I still greatly enjoy playing with Wang. Man, I really need to work on my phrasing. Anyway, there you go, that's what I thunk of Shadow Warrior 2. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought, and feel free to bicker amongst yourselves in the comments below. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.